alone, full of inner strength. Then the fated dawn arrives when her husband must die. So she wakes up in the morning, and there is a small stone on which Satyavan has sketched the figure of a goddess. She prays, gathers herself, and goes to her mother-in-law, Satyavan's mother, and tells her that 1 full year I have been here now. I have never gone out in the forest, but today I would like to go with him and see the scene of his labors, where he goes, where he brings the fuel. May I go with him? She says, and she took care not to let the slightest suspicion pass. And the old woman says, do as thou choosest. If in thy wisdom thou feelst that thou shouldst accompany Satyavan, do. And both of them set out. He supremely unaware of the doom that is coming. She keenly aware of every moment that is coming, passing, going one step nearer the doom. And they both set out hand in hand. He is full of joy that Savitri is today with him. And she knows that these are the last moments. With these conflicting emotions, they pass into the forest. And he tells her that this is the particular tree, that is this plant. He says this bird, he calls those birds which are his friends, and the birds answer. He tells this is the beast and that's my friend, and all the beasts and birds answer to his calls, much to her amusement. And then she says, speak more, Satyavan, speak more, because she wants to take in as much of her words, as much of her voice. And then he speaks, he sings a song, and then he stops where there is a mighty tree, and he sings a chant of a sage, and wields an axe to bring down fuel that he needed at home. And as he wields the axe, he suddenly stops. He turns to his wife and says, Savitri, this is strange. The pain that the tree must feel when I am cutting it, I feel in my arms. And he holds back. Then again he renews and lifts the axe. But at that time the great woodsman has struck, and the axe falls down from his hands. Savitri, he turns to Savitri. She gathers him and holds him. He collapses on her lap. She sits down. And then he says, Savitri, kiss me. Perhaps death may pass because thou kissest. And as she lowers her lips to kiss his lips fail. He has passed. His face changes. She is silent. Suddenly she becomes aware that they are not two only. There is a third presence, a dire, forbidding presence in the air. The birds have stopped singing. The trees themselves have stopped blowing in the wind. Everything is at a standstill. She knows that he has arrived, the god of death. Then she gathers herself in moments of crisis, when all nature's means fail. The inner strength of the soul comes forward, and the best in her comes. She unites herself with the divine strength that is hers, and she slowly gets up, stands up, leaves the body of the prince, of her husband, on the floor. She stands up and she sees the god of death, the dark figure. There is no exchange of words. And then he wants to take the soul, the being of Satyavan. But she has held it in her power, grasp, not physical. So he looks at her and says, Woman, unclasp, thy husband suffers. She unclasps. He bends down to the earth, and a luminous being comes out of the body of Satyavan. And he stands up, gets more and more luminous as he stands. The dark figure of God stands behind, and Savitri is there. And the peculiar procession starts with the soul, the death, and the human Savitri. They go, she still has her body. They pass, and as they pass they find, they go, the green, the leaves all touch her, and very soon they come into a region where it is a pathless path. They walk, but they don't know there is no path. The warmth of the earth is gone behind, and suddenly there is a darkness. She loses sight. They have gone far, far, and she feels they will escape her. Suddenly she casts aside her body, soars in her subtle body, and goes forward and joins them. He looks back angrily. He says, "Woman, you are human, you can't come here." She says, "You give me Satyavan." And there he begins the memorable journey of death, Satyavan and Savitri. They walk. He frightens her. He takes her into a realm of no man's land, where there is no earth, no human beings, no air, but still she survives. There is absolutely nothing, as if nobody has existed. That's the feeling. And still she lives, she goes. And she emerges forward. He tries to argue, it's no use coming, go back. He says, "But I want him, I love him, I have work to do." She said, "This is all human illusion. You speak of love, go back. You will have fresh loves, new loves, and in those new loves you will forget the old love." This man once, I am the final, ultimate. Everybody, whether God or man, has to come to me for peace. And your husband has come to me. This is the destiny. You also, when you die one day, you will have to come to me. Why do you want to take him back to this scene of strife and suffering? Go, he says. Then she says, "No, I won't go." He's angry. He frowns, and then they further pass. She says, "There is no God really. There is really no earth. This is all imagination." And then he says, look down," he says. And she sees the palaces and the minarets and the temples and the churches all rising, each proclaiming its gospel, that its knowledge is the highest, that teaching, that creed is the highest, and tomorrow they are nowhere. Dynasties, empires, all coming from a distance, rising up, the whole panorama of the earth scene is shown to her. And he says, "This is life, this is the vanity. Where is permanence? Where is thy truth here? This is what is going to be. Better you go back. You take boons from me, I will give you boons." She says, "No, I am going to come. I have the strength to come. But if boons thou must give, give what Satyavan would have desired when he was alive. Let his parents recover their sight. Let his parents recover their kingdom." He gives a sardonic laughter. "You want, I will give," he said. You want me to give him an external sight when he has got a fortunate inner sight, which means much more. I can give him the outer sight. Then may they have progeny and children. Yes, everything you can give, but you go back, he says. She declines. And then he argues. There is a long debate, as they pass, when all the existing ideologies, philosophies, the skeptist, the agnostic, and the atheist, all these, their arguments are put forward, and she controverses. And she tells him, "Oh, dark sophist of the universe, you want to slay my soul with the truth, slay my soul with the seeming truth." She argues, and then he feels the ground slipping. And then they come into a region where everything is beautiful, bright, harmony. It is the world, ideal worlds. The twilight of the heavens, the twilight of the earth has been shown. Now the twilight of the heavens, all beautiful, but all is fluffy. Everything comes and everything disappears. She tries to touch and she can't feel. She says, this is what it is. Everything is flimsy. Everything is fluffy. There is nothing concrete. You have seen the earth. You have seen the twilight of the heaven. Why do you do this? You accept my word. You go. And then when he finds that she can't be persuaded, she can't be convinced, and she insists upon her power, he says, ultimately, after a long debate, argument, O human claimant to immortality, reveal thy power, lay bare thy spirit's force, then will I give back to thee Satyavan. Or if the mighty mother is with thee, show me her face, that I may worship her. Let deathless eyes look into the eyes of death. And then Savitri looked on death and answered not. People of strength, they rarely speak. They speak but little. So she looked on death and answered not. A mighty transformation came on her, a halo of the indwelling deity, the immortal's luster that had lit her face, overflowing made the air a luminous sea. In a flaming moment of apocalypse, the incarnation thrust aside its veil. A little figure in infinity, yet stood and seemed the eternal's very house, as if the world's center was her very soul, and all wide space was but her outer robe. That is how she reveals herself. Around both, her light spreads like a luminous sea, an ocean. The presence, and at that time when there is that revelation, there is again this manifestation of power through the various lotuses. Again he describes. Her eyes were two stars that watched the universe. The power that from her being's summit reigned, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow. From there, the country of the head, it comes into the center of her brow, where the mind's lord in his control room sits here. There, throned on concentration's native seat, he opens the third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen. When light with the golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal will. That is what happens. The eternal will seizes the mortal will. The infinite vision replaces the finite vision. Then it stirred in the lotus of her throat of song, and in her speech throbbed the immortal word. The divine speech replaces the human speech. Her life sounded with the steps of the world soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought. And then, as glides God's sun into the mystic cave, where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart, and woke in it the force that alters fate. It poured into the navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life's nature's narrow home, On the body's longings grew heaven's rapture flower, and made desire a pure celestial flame. Broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the thousand-hooded serpent force, that blazing towered and clasped the world's self above. Joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the spirit's silent power. Thus changed, with this change effected in herself, she waited for the word to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw God's living reality. And then a voice was heard that seemed the stillness self. She doesn't speak. It is a divine voice that speaks through her. And that voice speaks. Then a voice was heard that seemed the stillness self, or the low, calm utterance of infinity, when it speaks to the silence in the heart of sleep. I hail thee, almighty and victorious death, thou grandiose darkness of the infinite, O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnawest at the universe, consuming the cold remnants of the suns, and eatest the whole world with the jaws of fire, waster of the energy that has made the stars, inconscious carrier of the seeds of thought, nations in which all knowledge sleeps entombed, and slowly emerges in its hollow breast, wearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance. And the voice, divine voice, speaks to him, Thou art my shadow and my instrument. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread, and the sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light. On the brevity of his half-conscious days, thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live, death, a while, be still my instrument. One day man too shall know thy fathoming heart, thy fathomless heart of silence, and the brooding peace of night, and grave obedience to eternal law, and the calm, inflexible pity in thy gaze. But now, O timeless mightiness, stand aside, and leave the path of my incarnate force. Relieve the radiant God from thy black mask. Release the soul of the world called Satyavan, freed from thy clutch of pain and ignorance, that he may stand master of life and fate, man's representative in the house of God, the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. She spoke. Death, unconvinced, resisted still, although he knew, refusing still to know, although he saw, refusing still to see. Unshakable he stood, claiming his right. His spirit bowed, his will obeyed the law of its own nature, binding even on gods. The two opposed each other face to face. His being like a huge fort of darkness towered. Around it her life grew, an ocean siege. A while the shades survived defying heaven, assailing in front, oppressing from above, a concrete mass of conscious power. He bore the tyranny of her divine desire. A pressure of the intolerable force weighed on his unbowed head and stubborn breast. Light like a burning tongue licked up his thoughts. Light was a luminous torture in his heart. Light coursed, a splendid agony through his nerves. His darkness muttered, perishing in her blaze. Her mastering word commanded every limb and left no room for his enormous will, that seemed pushed out into some helpless space and could no more re-enter, but left him void. He called to night. Death, when he finds himself helpless, he calls to night, but she fell shuddering back. He called to hell, but sullenly it retired. He turned to the inconscient for support, from which he was born, his vast sustaining self. It drew him back towards boundless vacancy. He called to his own strength, but it refused his call. His body was eaten by light, his spirit devoured. At last he knew defeat inevitable, and left crumbling the shape that he had worn, abandoning hope to make man's soul his prey, and force to be mortal the immortal spirit. Afar he fled, shunning her dreaded touch, and refuge took in the retreating night. The dire universal shadow disappeared, vanishing into the void from which it came, as if deprived of its original cause. The twilight realm passed, fading from their souls, and Satyavan and Savitri were alone. But neither stirred. Between those figures rose a mute, invisible and translucent wall. In that long, blank moment's pause, nothing could move. All waited on the unknown, inscrutable will, the divine will. And there is the eternal day, constant shining of the sun without night. And she is put to a final test. There is a radiant God, a beautiful God who appears and speaks. And that radiant God offers to her the felicity of heaven, the felicity of paradise, the peace of the spirit. She recognizes him. It is the same God of death, without the mask of death. And the mask has been torn off. He is the radiant God, offering her the choice to choose the bare spirit, the unbroken peace, the unending bliss. And he says, "O immortal, to felicity arise," he speaks. And she says to him, "O besetter of man's soul with life and death, tempting his heart with the far lure of heaven, testing his strength with the close touch of hell, I climb not to thy everlasting day, even as I have shunned the eternal night. To me, who turn not from my terrestrial way, give back the other self my nature asks. Earth needs his beautiful spirit made by thee, to fling delight down like a net of gold." She says, earth is the chosen place of mightiest souls. Earth is the heroic spirit's battlefield, the forge where the art mason shapes his works. Thy servitudes on earth are greater, King, than all the glorious liberties of heaven. So she says, I want to go there. I don't want this paradise. Again, the Godhead of the vision wonderful. He again argues with her, you come, you have this. Each time, she says, in vain thou tempt'st with solitary bliss, two spirits saved out of a suffering world, to one task for which our lives were born, to raise the world to God in deathless light, to bring the God down to the world on earth we came, to change the earthly life to life divine. I keep my will to save the world and man. Even the charm of thy alluring voice, O blissful Godhead, cannot seize and snare. I sacrifice not earth to happier worlds, because there dwelt the Eternal's vast idea, and his dynamic will in men and things. So only could the enormous scene begin. And she says, there is a purpose. I do not want this higher paradise. And then, when she refuses all these boons, all these temptations, that voice says, offers 5 boons, 4 or 5 boons. Last, he says, choose, spirit, thy supreme choice not given again. For now from my highest being looks at thee, the nameless, formless peace, where all things rest. In a happy, vast, sublime cessation know, an immense extinction in eternity, the last sinking of a wave in boundless sea, end of the trouble of thy wandering thoughts, close of the journeying of thy pilgrim soul. Accept, O music, weariness of thy notes, O stream, wide breaking of thy channel's banks. The moments fell into eternity, but someone yearned within a bosom unknown, humanity, her love for humanity, earth, yearns inside, and she refuses that peace. She says, silently the woman's heart replied, thy peace, O Lord, a boon within to keep, amid the roar and ruin of wild time. For the magnificent soul of man on earth, thy calm, O Lord, that bears the hands of joy. She claims that peace for the magnificent soul of man on earth. A second time the eternal cry arose. Wide open are the ineffable gates in front. My spirit leans down to break the knot of earth, amorous of oneness without thought or sign, to cast down wall and fence, to strip heaven bare, see with the large eye of infinity, unweave the stars and into silence pass. She is offered the boon of oneness, absolute identity with the Supreme. At that time, in an immense and world-destroying pause, she heard 1,000,000 creatures cry to her from the earth. Through the tremendous stillness of her thoughts, the woman's nature spoke. Thy oneness, O Lord, in many. Give it for them, thy oneness. A third time swelled the great admonishing call. I spread abroad the refuge of my wings. Out of its incommunicable deeps, my power, first was peace, next was oneness, third was power. My power looks forth of mightiest splendor, still into its majesty of sleep, withdrawn above the dreadful whirlings of the world. A sob of things was answer to the voice, and passionately the woman's heart replied, thy energy, Lord, to seize on woman and man, to take all things and creatures in their grief, and gather them into a mother's arms. she chooses for humanity. A last great time the warning sound was heard. I opened the wide eye of solitude to uncover the voiceless rapture of my bliss, where in a pure and exquisite hush it lies, motionless in its slumber of ecstasy. Breaking the silence with a peal and cry, a hymn of adoration tireless climbed, a music beat of winged and uniting souls. Then all the woman yearningly replied, the whole of the woman replied, Thy embrace which rends the living knot of pain, Thy joy, O Lord, in which all creatures breathe, Thy magic flowing waters of deep love, Thy sweetness give to me for earth and for men. And then after a silence, a still blissful cry began. Then the Supreme Voice, which has tempted her, which has offered her boons, it speaks. O beautiful body of the incarnate Word, thy thoughts are mine. I have spoken with thy voice. My will is thine. What thou hast chosen I choose. All thou hast asked I give to earth and men. All shall be written out in destiny's book. Be my trustee of thought and plan and act, the executor of my will, eternal time. And he speaks, forever love, O beautiful slave of God, O lasso of my rapture's widening noose, become my cord of universal love. That's what he asks her to be. The spirit ensnared by thee, forced to delight of creation's oneness sweet and fathomless. O mind, grow full of the eternal peace. O word, cry out the immortal litany. Built is the golden tower, the flame child born. That's the Supreme Voice. Descend to life with him thy heart desires. O Satyavan, O luminous Savitri, I sent you forth of old beneath the stars, a dual power of God in an ignorant world, in a hedged creation shut from limitless self, bringing God down to the insentient globe, lifting earth beings to immortality. And he says, all right. He charges them to go and fulfill their mission, and then he says, the voice says, the frontiers of the ignorance shall recede, more and more souls shall enter into light, minds lit inspire the occult summoner here, and lives blaze with a sudden inner flame, and hearts grow enamored of the divine delight, and human wills tuned to the divine will. A divine force shall flow through tissue and cell, and take charge of breath and speech and act, and all the thoughts shall be a glow of suns, and every feeling a celestial thrill. A sudden bliss shall run through every limb, and nature with a mightier presence fill. Thus shall the earth open to divinity, and common natures feel the wide uplift. Illumine common acts with the Spirit's ray, and meet the deity in common things. Nature shall live to manifest secret God. The spirit shall take up the human play, the earthly life become the life divine. The voice ceases, and suddenly she feels herself plunging down and down with the radiant Satyavan before her eyes. As she descends, she feels the warmth of the earth through her green leaves welcoming her, and she wakes up to see she is on earth. Satyavan is lying. She sits and watches for a while, takes in the whole scene, and she finds it is now time. He is sleeping. She wants him to wake up. And as she thinks he must wake up, he opens his eyes. And the first eyes he meets are hers. So he says, "What is it, Savitri? What was it? Where did we go far? Who was that strange, formidable shape, dark figure who was pursuing us? What has happened? That glow on your face. Was it a dream?" Then she answers him, "It was a dream and not a dream. All is well. Here, look at the trees, look at the green earth." And as they were talking, they hear, it is night, getting night. They hear a big noise, a commotion, a rumor, horse hooves of horses, people with crowns and lights, with lanterns, searching for something. A whole company of men on horses. They are searching. They have come. They have recovered their kingdom with their army and all that. They have come because these son and daughter, son's wife have not yet come back, and they are searching. And then somebody spies these people. Then they rush here, and the father looks at Savitri, and tells her, "Savitri, it was not like you. You have kept him away from us so long. What shall I do with this kingdom? What shall I do with this sight if I cannot see my son?" And then they look at him, and he just smiles and he says, Satyavan replied with a smiling lips, "Lay all on her. She is the cause of all. With her enchantment she has twined me round. Behold, at noon, leaving this house of clay, I wandered in far-off eternities, yet still a captive in her golden hands. I tread you a little hillock called green earth, and in the moments of your transient sun, live glad among the busy works of men." Then all eyes turned their wondering looks, where stood a deepening redder gold upon her cheeks. With lowered lids the noble lovely child. Then one asked, "What gleaming marvel of earth or skies stands silently by human Satyavan to mark the brilliance in the dusk of eve? If this is she of whom the world has heard, wonder no more at any happy change. Each easy miracle of felicity of her transforming heart the alchemy is." Then one spoke there who seemed a priest and sage, "O woman soul, what light, what power revealed, working the rapid marvels of this day, opens for us by thee a happier age." "Lo," she replies in a very low voice, "awakened to the meaning of my heart, that to feel love and oneness is to love, and this the magic of our golden change, is all the truth I know or seek or say, O sage." Wondering at her and her two luminous words, westward they turned in the fast gathering night, and they turned homewards. And at that time, lost in the halo of her musing brows, night, splendid with the moon dreaming in heaven, in silver peace, possessed her luminous reign. She brooded through the stillness on a thought, deep guarded by her mystic folds of light, and in her bosom nursed a greater dawn. However great the night, she always nurses a greater dawn in her bosom. That's the end of the epic. So I think this is a question hour now. I think questions may be asked, not necessarily on what we have been reading, but any questions, since I will be leaving this country within 2 or 3 days, any things that have arisen during the course of my stay, where what I say could contribute to a mental clarity of understanding. Any question could be asked.
The inconscience was described, I think, as disorganized. Is that
Subconscious.
the subconscious? Disorganized.
Where everything was there but not in its place.
Now, in the attempt to, it's like it's consciousness that organizes the subconscious, and doesn't ego get in the way of proper organization then, or am I?
The ego, up to a certain level, it functions as a coordinating point, as a fulcrum around which the whole machinery moves. So till a person has evolved enough to substitute the ego by the soul element, the ego has to be utilized. The ego is the pinpoint around which all the sensibilities are organized. So it is nature that has evolved the ego as a centralizing point. So consciousness has to utilize the ego till a luminous substitute is available, and one is in a position to activate and bring forward the soul, the enlightened element, which can replace the soul. That is why Sri Aurobindo says the ego was the helper, the ego is the bar. Ego has to be enlightened, and when the ego fully opens to the light, the ego disappears. But the ego in the spiritual context is not the ego in Freud or Jung and these Western systems of psychology. I find what ego means in the Eastern psychology is quite different from the ego here. For us, ego after a level is opposes a spiritual development. It vitiates. But here I find, if I have understood the Western approach correctly, ego is the point around which everything has to go on. Without the ego, they feel everything will be chaos. Am I right? Or may not be? Broadly. So the concept of ego in Eastern psychology, particularly the Patanjali's aphorisms on yoga, ahankara, myness, I-ness, that is egoism, is a product of nature. The soul is a concentration of the spirit. So, a product of nature necessarily in ignorance. The soul is a point of light of the spirit. But here, whether they make that distinction, I do not know. That distinction between nature and spirit. Now, in the East, nature itself is looked upon as a lower formulation of consciousness, not something alien. Consciousness, self-organizing itself in ignorance, is nature. When it enters into the realm of knowledge, light, it becomes, a puissance or a power or a Shakti. It is tomorrow, I think tomorrow or Thursday I have to deal with that. The difference between Shakti and Prakriti. That is typical of Eastern psychology. In the East, they don't have a separate science as psychology. Nowadays, following the Western model, we have started talking of a science of the mind, Manasa Shastra and all that. But it is all taken as a part of science of consciousness. The Tantra is nothing except a doctrine of consciousness. The whole world is presented as a self-pervasion of a divine consciousness. And that consciousness is not just awareness, but is a dynamic awareness. This is what is called Chit Shakti by Muktanath in his book Chit Shakti Vilas. It is an old conception. Modern science is coming to that now. You may call it energy, you may call it sort of power. The world has power. Yeah.
They also use the term personality,
Huh.
and I wonder whether that might not have some relationship to what the Western idea of ego is. Because it is said that in order to, as you raise your consciousness, you lose this ego, this sense of yourself. It is a sense of the image that one is trying to create, the role that one is playing, which is a false self. And I wonder if that might not enter into the Western, I don't know whether it enters into the Eastern idea, but the Western idea of ego, I think, includes that. It's almost something of egotism included within that concept.
You mean for them the personality and the ego are the same?
I think, yes, but there is a connection that ego is dependent upon the personality, perhaps. I don't know whether that.
I am not very familiar with the theosophical thought,
Personality serves the ego. It's in the service of the ego.
Now, in our spiritual psychology, personality, there is a surface personality and a real personality. The surface personality is highly ego infected. But the true personality is a projection of the soul in instrumental nature. Ego may be part of it, a dispensable part of it. The self, the central self, reflects itself on the mental level through the mind as the mental personality, as the emotional personality, as the vital personality, as the physical personality. Now all these 4 or 5 personalities have to be integrated, combined, organized around the soul. Then one reaches a certain fullness. Normally, a person more a mental personality, the others are inchoate. Some are what are called practical people, whose physical and vital personality is developed, the mind follows it. A total culture requires that all the 4 or 5 parts of being are equally developed, paid attention to, and organized around this soul. So personality is a kind of a purposeful formation built by the soul. The soul may build the personality of a poet in this birth. After reaching its fulfillment, it may choose the personality of a cobbler in its next birth. What has been gained in this birth as a poet remains as assimilated heritage in the causal body, subtle body of the self. So, across the lives, the soul goes on adding a number of personalities. And the more a person is evolved, you will find the more personalities he has. So we say he is a multiple personality, he is a many-sided being, he is a many-sided genius, he is a versatile man. That versatility is a sign that he has acquired that much of maturity in evolution. It is a sign you are an artist, you are a poet, you are an executive, all these things. That is, when a person is able to do many things at a time, it is a sign that he has developed remarkably. When you can do only one thing in your life, it means there is much that you have still to learn. A many-sided concentration has to be simultaneous. Yeah.
May I ask a question on religion, early religion?
Yes.
In the days of Christianity, when the apostles lost Judas, immediately after that, they felt they had to replace him with the 12th apostle. And is there a sign, is there a connection also between the 12 apostles and the zodiac? Okay, that's a fair question.
You're on. What does it mean? I don't understand.
Zodiac, astrology.
Zodiac and astrology.
Huh.
Is there a connection between that and the 12 apostles?
This is a theory, In the East also they give different versions. There are many such interesting possibilities. And there are certain occult truths of numbers. 6, 4, 12. And those truths express themselves at different levels, in different forms. Now, whether exactly this zodiac thing came because of that, we can't say. Possible that truth governed that. But apart from the fact that there is this truth of numbers, I wouldn't commit myself to any firm conclusion in these matters. What does Ron think about it?
I don't
Because you have made a study of Christian theology, that's why I'm asking.
I don't know anything about astrology though,
Uh-huh.
so I couldn't make a connection.
How about the enslavement of Judas? Why did they feel that was necessary? Is it because of the number?
Why don't you answer that on my behalf?
Well, I don't think. If they said that if. No, I can't. There's a good joke that wasn't.
Actually, I have not paid attention to this side of human development,
And one thing is that in Revelation, the number 12 is used a lot as an important number for the final manifestation. Maybe that's why.
See, because 12
Yeah.
represents creation. In the occult symbology, 12 represents creation. There are 12 months in a year. 12 revolutions. Everywhere 12. So whether that has got something to do with it, we do not know. The age, that age is so far removed from ours that we can speculate many things.
How many tribes?
They say, somebody said even Napoleon had 12 generals. And they tried to trace that he was the solar splendor and he had the satellites, like that. We don't know. But it is also a fact, there is, as I mentioned somewhere, that there is an old Jewish tradition that if 12 sincere people gather together in one spot and pray to God for revelation, He is bound to reveal Himself. 12 people. Only it is a sad commentary.
Jesus said it was three, I think he said. If three get together. He said if two get together.
I think this is an older tradition, before Jesus, the Jewish tradition. It is an older tradition.
There were supposed to be 12 tribes of Israel.
I see. Mm-hmm.
But now we've gone metric, so I decided.
Would you mind saying something about the metaphor of the Holy Family?
These, they utilize the existing human relations as symbols for the manifesting truths. The bride and the bridegroom really stand for the male and the female principles in creation. The male and the female are the same reality in two poises, the static and the dynamic, the presiding and the executor. Now, at a human level, this is pictured in the form of a bride and bridegroom, or the Lord and his spouse, whether in Christian thing or Indian, Hindu, or in Sufi. These things go on because they take existing human relations. Now, in India, there are some mystic poets in a certain age when the religion of devotion prospered, blossomed. There are a number of saints who came and propagated this approach of love, and a number of poets wrote poems using physical relations of love, husband, wife, lover, beloved, and all that, but having always the divine, the higher significance in their mind. They passed away, but their poems have been doing such harm to human posterity that they are taken literally, and the relations between God and man, God, all these are conceived in erotic terms. So now people have had to write commentaries explaining. But there is no erotic fact, So when we speak in terms of families, bride, bridegroom, it is all right in these such epics and things. But we have always to understand them as such.
Well, specifically referring to that, I wasn't able to get clear was the part of the psyche or whatever represented by the husband of Savitri. The fact that he was dying 12 months the symbolism of textile.
Here, in this context, he represents the human soul, man, and she represents the divine grace, which specially comes to deliver man from the jaws of death. And he is the divine soul that takes a human form. That is an eternal fact, because our souls are divine. And Satyavan literally means one who carries the truth. Satyavan, one who carries the truth. So each one of us carries a truth in our being. It may be little, it may be inchoate, and as we grow, as we develop, that truth acquires a form, becomes an entity. That entity develops into a person. And a highly evolved person has a soul personality. And when that personality joins the original divine personality, the man and divine become one. The soul and the oversoul become one.
From listening to the reading today, I got the vision of the salvation of mankind as a whole,
Yes.
as opposed to just individuals being saved.
Exactly.
Which is also a Christian vision, and Chardin, some of the modern philosophers.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, there also many people think that we're on the edge of a new
Yes.
phase of consciousness and spiritual development,
Yes.
and coming closer, I guess, to that mankind, that goal of mankind saved as a race or as a whole. Would you like to address yourself to that, or do you see that coming, or would you agree with that, or?
No, I do perceive, and in a certain sense experience, this fact of this addition of a collective dimension to man's spiritual destiny. Hitherto, man's spiritual destiny was individual, to save himself, to unite with God. But now the stress is on the collective aspects. It is considered and realized to be an extreme selfishness, spiritual selfishness, to work for one's own salvation, leaving the entire society where it was. So today the stress is on relating individual progress to the betterment of society at every step. A man can be as perfect only as the society is perfected. So whether in Chardin or in Sri Aurobindo or in modern thought of spiritual persuasion, individual liberation is made the first foundation or a radical step leading to a collective growth. But an imperfect man cannot help the world. So man needs to liberate himself. Man needs to acquire a certain light, liberation and strength and power. To that extent, spiritual life has to lay stress on individual equipment. But that is not the goal and the end. That is an indispensable step, a radical step, which enables you to play your part in God's manifestation. Otherwise, your contribution will always be a flawed contribution. And after achieving a certain inner liberation, one gets the capacity of identifying oneself in consciousness with the universe. Otherwise, you identify yourself only at the ego level. You inject your own notions, ideas, conceptions on others. But when you have acquired that soul quality and consciousness, you really become one with the universal Godhead, universal humanity. And you can meaningfully contribute to their development. And the world is moving towards this stage where God's glory in terms of knowledge, joy, power are being increasingly revealed and established on earth. So the old conception, Christian conception of the kingdom of God on earth, and Sri Aurobindo's conception of this Gnostic humanity, Sardin's conception of humanity finding its culmination in a Christosphere, I think they all point to one thing. The terminology may differ, the processes may differ, but broadly and significantly, the goal is the same. Scholars are not agreed whether, in Chardin's thought, the culmination is to be on earth or beyond there. Some say his Christosphere is to be taken in a kind of symbolic way, that it is Christ consciousness that will be manifested on earth, and humanity will find its culmination and unity in that on earth. So we do not know, particularly I do not know, I have not specialized in Chardin's works, but if we have all understood in spiritual experience that the kingdom of God is here, the kingdom of God is the kingdom of higher consciousness, and it has to be manifested on earth. The earth is the destined place where the God's glory has to be worked out and manifested and established. So to that I think all major streams of spiritual thought are moving today. And that is my conception and content of the new age.
May I ask another one?
Yeah?
In the early Egyptian civilization, do you think that there were possibly some clones from the Atlanteans?
You know, these attempts have been going on in different traditions, different civilizations from the beginning of time. And the fact that these attempts are being made show that nature has this intention. Nature is trying, to give up, to find out a way of bringing things to birth, dispensing with the sexual process. And they have been trying. And in our Indian scriptures there are a number of legends, where the great ones, great beings are born without the sexual congress. And we all took them as stories, to entertain us. But now as I look back, I see that they all embody a certain truth, that nature is in the process. The mother said, who was greatly concerned with this next step in evolution, she worked hard towards this, worked on her own body towards a certain bodily transformation, and she said that in the new age, birth will not be from a sexual process, that is definite. But what it is going to be, it is in the womb of nature. Possibly, the present occult process of what is called materialization, on the subtle physical plane, over this physical plane, there is subtle matter. Ours is gross matter, rigid, that is plastic. By exercise of will, occult will, one can assemble the subtle matter in the form in which one wants, and one, if knows the trick, precipitate it on earth. You have the fountain pen, you have a flower, you have vibhuti, whatever you like. And whether this materialization is an indication that such a process is in the offing, we do not know. And this coning and all that, it is a very significant development. There is a tendency to poo-poo these things, But I don't think that particular thing may not be true. But the drive towards that is real. If not here, somewhere, they will find out the process. Man who has split the atom and released so much of energy and shown how in such a small thing there is so much of creative energy is certainly capable, of finding out the process. It takes time, but it will come by a sudden intuitive revelation.
You mentioned the mother and working on her body and the transformation of the body. Would you address yourself
Yes.
or would you speak of the relationship with the body and its shape, not shape,
Yeah.
but physical tone and health and all that, to the spiritual journey and
Yes.
its part?
Yes. The body has immediate relevance and connection with the spiritual progress if the objective of spiritual life is to participate in the divine manifestation on earth. In the older ascetic traditions, the aim was self-liberation and after death, a merger or union or going into the beyond. So there the body did not enter into the situation. The body was just, taken note of so that it may not stand in the way, just to keep it healthy. The body was considered to belong to earth, a thing unclean, giving rise to unclean impulses, and a body to be rejected. The body was always looked upon as something inferior, and only the soul had to be saved. But today, with this perspective of the development of a total man, and everything has a claim and a right to ask for perfection in light, perfection in a divine consciousness, the body has to be taken note of. And the inner spiritual progress has to be related to the body. The body has to be illumined with the consciousness, just as we try to illumine our mind with this inner light. So there is a deliberate attempt to make each limb of the body conscious. At present, our different limbs function mechanically. But in a yoga or spiritual discipline, where the body's claim for liberation and perfection is recognized, there is what is called a yoga of the body, whereby you pay respect to the body, give just the right type of food which the body needs, not forcing the body or driving the body beyond its capacities. Doing certain exercises, asanas or whatever it is, so as to stimulate and activate all the nerve centers, make the body conscious, live its independent life. And second, the body is subject to the law of deterioration, decay and death. We have now come to a stage that the mind need not die. The mind can go on progressing. But the body is subject to the law of physical matter, and there is wear and tear and it dies. But if the body is so disciplined, made agile, plastic enough to keep pace in its along with the progress of the soul, then the body need not die. But the body has such a faith in death, it is constantly exposed to the universal faith in death, that it takes for granted. And this faith in death is imprinted even on the physical cells. When mother went in a spiritual pursuit, down to the cells she found that the loyalty of each cell is to death. down the thousands of years, that universal law of death has put such an imprint that it is taken for granted that you grow, decay and die. Each cell has this faith. So she found out in the course of her conscious attempt that each cell has to be exposed to this light of ever growing growth and illumination, that each cell has to be cajoled, educated and converted so that it shifts its loyalty to the principle of immortality from death. And she found that each cell resisted that attempt. And each time there was resistance, it translated itself as intense pain in the physical body. She would get pain. And when the disciples insisted that doctors must examine it, she said it is not a medical problem. But still when the doctors had to have the say, they said it is nervous and all that, she laughed. And when she said once by persuasion the cells responded, there was an ebullition of delight. Each cell was dancing. Once it shifted, it started dancing in ecstasy. And this process, she said, is a long process. If this process is worked out in one human body, that establishes the possibility for all human beings if they try. But it has to be worked out. And in her life, she felt it was a race between age and this fulfillment. She was about 80 or 85 when she came to a stage when this experiment could be started on her body. And the body aged quickly. And when she was by 96, many of the things, due to this pressure of working, they had failed. And then the experiment had to be stopped. So whoever starts it now will have to continue from that point. Up to that, a certain number of cells have been converted. And she said, one need not die if that is done. When she was asked how many years it will take, she said from the point of a total conversion of consciousness, of human into the divine, when there is nothing in you that feels that you are separate from the divine, when every thought, every feeling, every movement is impelled by the divine consciousness, from that point, it will take 300 years for this complete transformation of the cells, which will make death impossible. But she said, we do not know. But one rider, she added, but we are thinking and talking in human language. There is an incalculable factor of grace. If the divine grace wills, it can affect it in a moment. We do not have the secret of that process. That is why we have to go cell by cell. So, keeping this proviso that the divine grace can affect this revolution any time, from our human end, it will take 300 years. And you see the attempt all over the world from different approaches, different angles to work out this transformation shows that the time has come. Nature wants it to be done.
It seems that most of the attempts in the world, though, are not spiritually motivated.
No.
And I wonder what, in a vision of the world that that affirms multiplicity and the value of creation, what is the point of keeping one form?
No, the thing is, when you conquer death, Sri Aurobindo explains, it does not mean that you will be a prisoner of this body for all time. He said, why? Why should I be compelled to keep my body for hundreds of years and be a mummy, Egyptian mummy? He said, no. What I want is disease and things shall not overtake me. I should be able to live and function as long as I want in this body. And when I want to change, I do it of my own will. So, a perfect, liberated and a perfected man, a Gnostic man, will not die. It does not mean that he will not change his body. In our scriptures, there are always the stories. They call it Ichamrityu, that is, casting of the body at will. There are many legends. The so and so, he decided, and like a coat, he took out his body and threw. Now, these may or may not have happened, but they are visions of the possibilities, which they held up before humanity in the form of legends. So, it's not that you and I will be compelled to be in these bodies, but we will not be forced by death. We will be able to leave the body when we choose. Tia is a candidate for that, aren't you?
You think so?
You wouldn't like to live in the same body for all time. You don't know.
I don't know.
I was reading some literature on the incorporation of Aurobindo. It's very idealistic and beautiful. How well does that experiment proceed, and how can there be a complex organization without authority or completely shared authority?
We have had very promising results in this line. It is only 10 years since the experiment was started, and while certain features have emerged which shows that we have not been sufficiently careful and we have been too optimistic about the capacity of human nature to change and respond, still certain possibilities that have emerged are most promising. For instance, the last 5 years they have been able to function without a physical head. There is not one person to whom they can ask for orders or guidance or rulings. There is nobody. And they all are gradually learning how to function collectively. How, without a hierarchical head, there is a sharing of wisdom. Each one accepts somebody's capacities and authority to guide in that particular field. So a collective consciousness is slowly growing. And if each one only accepts the bona fides of others, remembers the purpose for which one has come there, I think Aurobindo could be a model for other New Age communities. Because there, a complete freedom is given from conventions, religious or social. And each individual is fully trusted to be responsible and to be a useful member of the collectivity. So no experiment has gone that far. We have been too ambitious in certain matters, but we are learning the lessons, But the faith of the people who are there is still strong. That if not today, one day. But nothing that we have, they will be lost to humanity. Each day of Aurobindo has something to contribute, negatively or positively. And I suppose, as Sri Aurobindo says in his human cycle, 100 such experiments will have to be made before something like a real pattern will emerge. There will have to be 100 Aurobindos, each one improving upon the other, each one having its distinct character, reflecting the environmental pattern, and it will take time. But to have thought of it at all, to have ventured into it, was a great daring. Only Mother could have done it. No human, mind could have dared that much.
this thing about what you were talking about just before this question, you remember that man who asked the question last year about cancer? I just read, we were talking about aging, that one of the reasons that people age is because all our life our cells renew themselves by dividing, making new cells identical to the old cells. But one of the reasons people age is because due to X-rays or rays from outer space or natural rays or radiation from nuclear power, whatever, the cell, when it divides, it doesn't produce the same kind of cell afterwards. It produces one that they call a mutation, and less so certain areas of the body degenerate. But cancer, that's a mutation also, but it's a mutation that's powerful because they're strong cells. It's just that they overrun the rest of the body and growth comes. And then when you were talking about Aurobindo just now, you said if each one can recognize the bona fides of the other, and you see, I wonder if that fellow's question, the answer to that might be along the lines of that the body has caught the aspiration of this experimentation for immortal consciousness, and that it's just that the cells that catch it, that produce the cancer, are too eager, and they don't recognize the bona fides of the other cells in the body, so there's an imbalance.
Possible. It is a way, I think it's an approach.
Is it proper to look to nature for examples that the entire universe is an example of our microcosm in the same way as your answer?
Yes. Man is an epitome, microcosm of the macrocosm. It is true. But only man is intended to move forward. Nature takes her own leisurely way. But man is a condensed nature point, to find the way, clear the way. Nature is using man to precipitate her evolution. Once man has come, the initiative is not in the hands of nature. The initiative is in the hands of man. And man today represents the meeting ground between consciousness, spirit and nature. It is in man's consciousness that both the divine spirit and this material nature meet. Yeah?
Regarding physical symptoms of the body, disease and disharmony, there's the idea that these symptoms are manifestations of subtler inner disharmonies, perhaps vital or mental.
There are diseases and diseases. There are diseases which are entirely product of environmental pollution contribution, like viruses and things. There are diseases which are karmic, due to the previous karma. Those diseases come. There are diseases which are expressions of an inner disequilibrium. So we can't generalize in these matters and say every headache is due to spiritual reasons. Headache may be due to indigestion, Headache may be due to inability to assimilate the higher descent of consciousness. Just possible I am talking to you nonsense and you want to get out of it and you get a headache. Now, there are categories of illness. We can't generalize.
For those categories, let's say for those illnesses that might fall into a category of a projection of an inner disharmony,
Yes.
are there, would you say anything
Yes.
about pragmatic ways to work on this?
Yes, one has to, open oneself to peace. Peace is the greatest healer. And once you receive the peace, to direct it to the affected part. Mentally, project the waves of peace towards that part which is affected. all disequilibrium.